Get ready before life happens. The podcast helping you navigate life's what ifs.
Welcome to Get Ready Before Life Happens. I'm your host, Tony Stewart. Today, I'm joined by Diana Yanez, financial planner and host of the Highly Sensitive Money podcast. Diana, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Tony, for being here, for having me here.
I'm here. You're here. This is great. Tell us a little bit about yourself. What is your origin story and how did it lead you to focusing on social justice?
Oh man, my origin story is really windy, but the first time I worked in finances, I was an intern at Merrill Lynch in the summer of 2007. So that was when Lehman Brothers went under,
Oh,
Merrill
yeah.
Lynch was purchased by Bank of America, and my mom's house went into foreclosure. So my mom was part of the subprime mortgage. Like she bought a house that was way too expensive.
Oh,
And I was there for about a year and a half, almost 2 years interning. I was actually interning in their philanthropy department that was created after. So I lived in Orange County in California at the time, which is a very Republican part of California. But there had been a giant scam, so Merrill Lynch was required to create a philanthropy department to kind of
oh,
like
yeah.
to make up for it. I don't even remember what the scam was, but like I just even where I work, like we were the in my firm in my team, we were all people of color, and we were like the only people of color in the entire office.
Jeez.
So it was just like my first experience of finance was so gross. I left thinking the money's nice, but never again. And I then went into social work where I burned out emotionally. And then I went into demographics, which is where I have my master's degree, and I missed people. And then I went into like profit analysis at a manufacturing company. We manufactured boxes. So, and that was kind of like my happy place. I was like, oh, I get to work with people, I get to work with numbers. And then luck connected me with Janet, who with another with like a CFP who became my mentor. And we met through where I was volunteering. I was a Toastmaster, so I was helping volunteer there. And she brought me a brochure that from the CFP board that said, CFP, great career for women. Because I had always been interested in personal finance. I was reading the books, I was curious about her job, and she was like, this is such a great career. You would be great. You like numbers, you like people, you're so warm. And I told her, like, gross finance, never, like, and she kept courting me. Like, she literally was like, just come to an FPA meeting, a Financial Planning Association meeting, check out who people are, hear their stories. And within Orange County, I got to see an entire different side of the profession. George Kinder's book, The Seven Stages of Money Maturity, is also a big part of my story because reading his book was like, oh yeah, like that sounds beautiful, helping people align their money and their values and their mission and their life. But like you have to have at least $3 million to be able to do that. Like that's what I thought because that's what I saw where I
Mhm.
first worked. And after a year of attending, like I literally either attended an FBA meeting or I had an informational interview. Like I was very, very hesitant to change careers again, especially into finance. But after a year, I was like, okay, I'm ready. I'm ready to commit. And I started taking the CFP courses. It took me about a year and a half, 2 years to pass them. And in 2018, I joined a firm in Philadelphia that really focused on life planning. But literally, that was like a decade after I left. I think it was a decade after leaving Merrill Lynch and being like, never will I work in finance. I found myself in finance, and now it's been 8 years, and this is really like my life's calling to do finance the way that I do it now.
Well, that's awesome. And I think for a lot of the people who are watching and listening, the Merrill Lynch resonates because it is almost two different industries when you look at Merrill Lynch and some of the similar outfits like it and versus life planners and everything else. So that's an interesting story. And I do know that other people have been turned off via the bigger wirehouses because it is a very different environment, I guess, is probably a good way to put it. So,
And it didn't align with who I am. And I when I worked at Merrill Lynch, there were great people there, right? There were great people there, and there were people who were doing really well financially, people who were helping their clients, and then there were also a lot of people who were not, and like just you could find everything there. So I also like I want to have like a nuanced view of what my time there was. It was not the broker-dealer world was not a fit for me. And at first I was like frustrated when I first came back into the industry because I was like in my early 30s and I'm like I'm so behind because I would see people in their early 30s who started off in the career and like were so much further ahead than me. Yet those experiences of working in social work, working in the government, working at a regular corporate company. Like they really helped informed my career. And now I'm grateful for those other experiences. But I also just like, I also feel really happy to like have found a job that feels really aligned with who I am and what my values are. And that is also financially lucrative because that was part of what the CFP brochure said, like not only are you having a meaningful impact, you're also getting well paid. And that was not the experience that I had when I was a assistant social worker at all. It is not well paid work.
yeah, unfortunately, social workers are not paid what they should be paid, but that's a whole other discussion.
Yeah.
But I love what you said about aligning your job with your values, because I think that's something that oftentimes people feel out of alignment with, but they have a job where they're making good money, so they're like, I don't want to change.
hmm And where I currently work, so the my current setup is I wear two main hats. I like I said, I started off at a firm that really valued financial life planning, so like really talking about people's emotions. And my sense of social justice was starting to become kind of riled up by like, as a woman of color, I felt like sometimes I had to keep my values at the door. I had to come in and pretend that when my clients were doing something that like, when they would have progressive values, but those values had nothing to do with their money, I was really sensitive to the dissonance there. And I noticed in myself that sometimes I was judging my clients, and that felt really, really gross because I'm a fiduciary, right? I'm trying
Yeah.
to act in their best manner. And the values misalignment eventually led me to leaving that firm to focus on money coaching. So, as a money coach, originally my idea I was going to do group coaching. I was going to focus on people who did not have assets to manage. And I remember someone saying, like, why don't you start a nonprofit? Because you're not going to make any money doing that.
Yeah.
And they were right. Like, I didn't, that has not become a financially fruitful area of my work, but it's become very meaningful. And I still continue to do money coaching through my business, All the Colors. I tried the group coaching for a while and realized like the amount of marketing I had to do to like fill that up was more than I wanted to do. So I did put that aside. However, it was a huge learning opportunity. So that was part of my work. And then the other part is that I started like what I call like my daily bread job. I was contracting as a financial planner for 12 hours a week. That started like a couple of months after I started my entrepreneurship. And that daily bread job, that like job that was just to cover the minimum, actually grew into something much more. And now, so that was with Strategy Squad. That was founded by Nicole Middleton. She's also out of the Bay Area. And it's associated with the RIA Natural Investments. And 2 years into contracting for Nicole, I also became an advisor with Natural Investments. And Natural Investments, there, the focus is on helping people align their investments with their values. So we focus a lot on like fossil fuel free. We do a lot of community investing. So community investing could like help slow down gentrification, help turn farms into organic farms. We even have an investment that's like focused on how to bury people in a way that's like good for the environment. So it's very like it's very much about creating a solidarity economy, creating a transition, not just like putting out the bad, like we don't do private prisons or fossil fuels, but also investing in the good. So I both am a money coach with All the Colors, and there I've worked with mainly women of color entrepreneurs who are going through that transition of having a stable salary to multiple sources of income or like having their entrepreneurship. And I'm also an advisor with Natural Investments, and I'm also a financial planner for Strategy Squad. And like I have a
Wow.
couple of other things, like I have a course that I sell. I sometimes get paid for speaking events, and I give workshops. So it's become like a mixture of things. I'm really happy now, but it did take the full 4 years to get to where I'm at.
Wow. That's a lot. But I love what you're talking about is I'm actually undergoing the certification to become an impact philanthropic advisor. And so actually just coincidentally, yesterday we were talking about the different forms of impact investing and this concept recoverable grants, which
Mm.
are ways to encourage people to put more money into their community. And so, when you talk about those things, I think that's something else that, people can take in mind is that you can do things with your money um, that reflects who you are as a person. You don't have to just invest in the S&P 500. So if you're turned off by an industry or a company or you don't believe in what they're doing, is you can, like you're talking about, is put your money to work and have it make an impact wherever you want to have it make an impact.
Exactly.
So that's fantastic. So let's talk about your podcast because I love the name and the concept. What inspired you to launch the Highly Sensitive Money podcast?
Right. Thank you for that question. Because I have these like multiple sources of work, I was trying to figure out how do I market across my different client types, right? How do I market to get like workshops and to also do money coaching and to also get investment clients? Like what did all of them have in common? And so high sensitivity, I'll start off with explaining what it means. And I'm going to use one of my favorite ways of explaining is like the DOES acronym. So D is for depth of processing. And what that looks like is that often when you share something with someone who's highly sensitive, they'll think of all of the tendrils that are connected. That's why and there's a lot of desire for context. That's why when I shared about like where I worked at Merrill Lynch, I gave all of the context of like where I really worked and like why that team was created because that impacted my experience at Merrill Lynch. So that's D for depth of processing. O is for overwhelm because you're getting in so much information. It's easy as a highly sensitive person to get overwhelmed. Like there's just so much stimulus. Your receptors, I guess, are so open. And overwhelm can often look like fight, flight, freeze, like you shut down. Um, so that's what overwhelm means. E is for empathy. So a lot of empathic resonance. Um, that can look like, and that's actually one of the reasons why I believe that it's one of the reasons why you often see a lot of highly sensitive people in social justice spaces, there's more representation of highly sensitive people in social justice spaces than in than the average population, because other people's suffering feels so present to people who are highly sensitive. Like there's this level of porousness. And S is for sensory inputs. Like it's too hot, it's too cold, it's too bright, it's too dark. Like that kind of like the physical sensations are really present. And so my journey to recognizing that I was highly sensitive was bumpy because the first time someone asked me if I was highly sensitive, I was like, no, that sounds weak, that sounds feminine. No, like that's not what I want to be about. And then a client said, us that work, she's also an entrepreneur. She said, for those of us that are highly sensitive and work with highly sensitive people, and my face was just like, I'm not highly sensitive. Like, what are you talking about? And then the third person that asked me, this was like within a year, was a friend. And my response again was like, no, that's not me. And she laughed and asked me more about it. She's like, why are you so resistant to this term? That third time I was like, okay, it's been a year. Three people have asked me. I started to look more into it and I realized that it definitely is part of my experience. I just masked it a lot because it was for whatever reason, right? It was just easier to pretend to not be sensitive than to just own my level of overwhelm. Like I've always had a hard time with the news because they put me out. Like I will read the news and then need to lay down, So it's not
Oh
like I
boy.
can't be I'm not super functioning. So I have to like hear the news through the filtration of other people. And as an investment advisor, it means that I mostly look at investment news. Like I don't like those are the news that I'm taking track of. So the podcast, and then again, I realized that my clients, the clients that I best served, were also highly sensitive. I remember teaching this workshop where I was talking about the complexities of money, and it was mostly women of color in the workshop. And a couple of people cried, right? Because I was talking about money in such a gentle way. I have this quiz that I created on like what tree is your money, like the different money archetypes that I have, and I made them trees because trees are so neutral. I didn't want to be like the emperor or the star. Like I just wanted to
Oh
have
yeah.
completely neutral terms. And this group was so grateful for the nuance that I brought and the neutral and the compassion, the holding. And then I would teach this workshop at another place where they're like, you're moving too slow. We're like, they're like, what is all this fluff? Just tell me how to invest, And I realized that because of who I am and my skill set, I best serve clients who also identify as highly sensitive. And there are highly sensitive people across the wealth spectrum. So that led to creating the podcast. And because social justice is such a huge part of me, like that was all three things, right? High sensitivity, money, and social justice, especially because I work at a firm that's very social justice oriented. And because as a woman of color, most of my clients are also women of color, and you just are dealing with social justice intricacies that are important that affect your money, like the pay wage discrepancy. Like there's so many things. So that's like the origin story of the podcast with all of its context.
Well, that's awesome. And for everybody watching and listening, there will be a link to Diana's podcast. I would recommend checking it out. If you get my newsletter, you know that I showcase the podcast every once in a while. So I love the work that you're doing. I was just thinking, one thing we haven't really done is define social justice. Would you mind just defining it real quick?
Yeah, that's complicated, right? There's so many different ways where people might define it. My working definition of social justice also includes environmental care. So, one of my favorite phrases about justice is that without justice, love is coddling. And I don't remember who it was that said this, so I'm paraphrasing somewhat. But without justice, love is coddling, right? Like you're just letting too many things go. You're not really calling on people to hold their own weight or calling on people to take responsibility. But without love, justice is too cold. It's too
Mm,
harsh. So I think of social justice as combining love and justice. Bell Hooks is an author and a thinker who questioned a lot of like patriarchy and a lot of capitalism and a lot of heteronormative rules and ableism. So it's thinking about all of those things. And another example of social justice is like, for example, when the Americans with Disability Act went through and and it was required that establishments have ramps so that
mm,
people in wheelchairs could get in. It helped so many more people. It helped pregnant women. It helped people who were using crutches. It helped people who were elderly. It helped people who were just like not feeling ready to go upstairs. And that's what social justice to me is. It's giving access, giving tools to those that are most disempowered, knowing that that will help everyone because everyone at some point in their life needs to use the ramp instead of the stairs. It's happened to everyone.
yeah, I love that as a definition because people hear these terms and sometimes they get politically charged, especially right now in our uh, conversation nationally but these are things, like you said, that impact all of us in a different way at different times. And we need to be open to that and appreciate that even if it doesn't help you today, it might help someone in your family. It could help you at a later time. Like you said, we're all going to need the ramp at some point in our lives, or one of our loved ones will. So even if
Yes.
we don't
And
need it today, it's something that we're doing as a community. I would even say, so if the term social justice kind of turns you off for whatever reason, is think about something that you're doing for your community. Maybe, I don't know, what do you think?
Yeah, and I think it's also like speaking to the interconnectedness of us, right? Because like maybe you right now don't need the ramp, but one of your family members does, or one of your friends does. And that's part of it. And I think social justice, and again, as a highly sensitive person, there's like that level of depth of processing of like seeing what other people need that's really important, which is where I also think environmental care is important. Research shows that like that a 10-minute walk in nature is one of the best remedies for stress, right? And we're not caring for nature right now. We're not valuing it. There's so many species that are going extinct and like the grief that that causes. So that's where I bring in environmental care. But really the interconnectedness of creation. Yeah. So it's a big word. And it's a catch-all. And I appreciate the question of like, how do I define it? And the working definition today may be different tomorrow.
Exactly. And that's the thing with some of these terms is they do have multiple definitions, and it's not necessarily a set definition. So it's more thinking about it and holding it as a concept, I think, is the important thing to take away. So, as we talked earlier about values, is what do you recommend to your clients and to other people to start aligning their money with their values?
One of the easiest ways, one of the fastest places where you can do that, and again, I'm assuming here, like let's say, for example, that someone's value is that they want to care for the environment, right? Fossil fuel free banking is a really clear place to start. Finding banks that do not finance fossil fuel exploration, that do not finance fossil fuel finance like loans. You can Google the Dirty Dozen and you'll find the Dirty Dozen banks that are financing the majority of fossil fuel exploration, right? So that's one place on the environmental care side. On the social justice side, I would say like shopping local, right? When you shop locally, the money that you spend at your local baker is more likely to stay within your community than if you shop at a transnational corporation, right? So going local is like a clear big way to promote employment within your community.
I love that. And, and when you think about it, those are people that you know and that you're supporting their livelihood. And we've seen many communities across the United States that have started to collapse because they don't have that local economy anymore. So sometimes when we think about these things, there is a ripple effect
Mhm.
um, to social justice and to impact investing. Is that it's not only that you go to the local baker, but as you point out, it's that the local baker will then be able to afford to do whatever they do with their money. And so it
Mhm.
creates a ripple effect that supports the community. So I would say, even social justice is really more about community and aligning your life with what you value. And it's your money. So you have the right to do that. I think sometimes we miss that as like, we don't feel like we can do that, but it's our money. You can do anything with your money that you want. Um,
Yeah, and I think it's one of those things of like not wanting to be black or white of like doing it right or doing it wrong. Like I know that a lot of the time shopping locally is more expensive, right? So shopping at your co-op might be more expensive and it might be something that you do once a month. And then the other three, like if you go shopping every week, 1 week of the month, maybe you'll go to the co-op, and the other 3 weeks of the month, go to whichever grocery store you go to that's maybe more affordable. But starting to spread your spending that way, just to show that it's possible and and it's meaningful.
yeah, well, what we do locally is we're fortunate in our city that we have a lot of family-owned restaurants. So we
Mm.
try to only go to family-owned restaurants, and a lot of times it's a relatively small knit community. So we know the owners and we know that they give back to the community. They're part of the community. So yeah, sometimes it may not be as cheap as other alternatives, but it's one way that we've chosen to give back to our community by supporting the local business owners. And we get some great meals. too. So
It's a
it's a
win-win.
win-win. And impact investing can be that way. It can be a win-win. So one of the questions I want to ask you, and we talked about people with marginalized identities. How can people with marginalized identities navigate the world of finances?
I think of so my parents were both born in Mexico, and I can speak to like my experience as their child and like what I saw with them as an example of like how we chose to navigate this. But I remember when I was like 12 years old, my dad had invested in the stock market and he lost two-thirds of his
Ooh,
investment. And I think he invested in one thing, right? Like a sum of money that was meaningful to my family. And he lost two-thirds of it. And my mom was horrified. And never again did my dad invest. He considers what I do as an investment advisor gambling.
wow.
And it was financial illiteracy, and it's also Mexico. A lot of Latin America has gone through. I mean, Mexico had like a semi-dictatorship with there was one political party in power for 75 continuous years. So
Wow.
it wasn't like one person was a dictator, but one political party was did not allow anybody else to come through. And like when there were like there was government theft that happened at one point, so the currency lost a lot of its value. And this left an imprint in my parents of like major distrust of corporations. So my dad had the courage to invest and it went really badly. And now when my mom is now able to invest, like I manage her investments for her in her Roth IRA. And I have to deal with a lot. I tend to both of them are respond to their money questions with a lot of like tenderness and compassion. So I think for people of color, it's like look at your community. For people who are marginalized, right? Look at your community. What is the history that they're navigating? What are the negative experiences that they've had that no longer allow them to think that something different is possible, right? That's one place to do it. And another is to also look at the resilience of like, what are the positive things that they've experienced? Both of my parents immigrated to the US for better financial opportunities, and both of them achieved it. They are, I remember my dad telling me how difficult it was for him, like as is in his ego or like psychically to have because he's an engineer. He's the first in his family to go to college. He's an engineer and he had an engineering job in Mexico. My parents married and then they moved to Los Angeles where he washed dishes. And it really hurt his ego to like be going to go that route. Yet financially it made more sense. He had more financial opportunities washing dishes in Los Angeles than he did as an engineer in Mexicali. And in the long run, it has worked out. But he did say like psychically as like a 26-year-old, it was just like he couldn't believe like where he had fallen. Um, and there's this resilience that went through it, right? Because my dad is now an engineer in the US. It took a lot. I remember, so I'm gonna gush on my dad, but he has this really sweet story of he was a taxi driver at one point. He did a lot of like random menial jobs. And he had a client, a passenger in the taxi who asked my dad, like, what's your biggest dream? And my dad was like, I want to be a pilot. And he thought that was like a pipe dream. It was never going to happen.
Hmm.
And the passenger was like, you can go to the community college. It's not going to be that expensive and just like start taking the tests and blah, blah, blah. My dad didn't speak English very well at the time. So what he did is he memorized the pilot's book. And he went through however many courses it was. It took him 15 years, but he eventually memorized the book. And I remember he said that one of the times he took the test and he had like an 100 on it. He got every answer
Wow.
right, even though he didn't speak English because he had memorized the book, right? So that like strength and resiliency in him makes me so proud and it just shows me the potential in humans, right? The potential in myself. So it's kind of like, yes, look at the hardships that they've gone through, but also look at the things that they've done that are just like wildly successful and take both of them into consideration and know that and know how they impact you.
Yeah, I think that's so important because when it comes to our money, is we tend to think of all the negative things that we've gone through, and those are the things that stick out. Is like With me, I had too much credit card debt when I graduated college, started out, and that shapes how I think about debt. Um, but there are positive things, and I think that's something for all of us to think about is, what's positive and what's negative. So I love that you frame that because it's so easy to lose track of the positive and all the things that you have achieved. And people do get overwhelmed with their money. To get back to especially highly sensitive people is when you're overwhelmed is, center yourself and think about, like you said, if you need to reset, reset. Um,
Yeah. And another really important concept, especially for highly sensitive and for anyone who's got like a lot of money anxiety, is there's this term in psychology called titration. I'm not a psychologist, but like I know of the term. And it basically means staying like know what it feels like in your body to be centered, right? Like what does it mean to like have deep breaths and all of that? And if you're starting to look at like your credit card statements and you want to see how much credit card debt you have across multiple accounts and you start to get overwhelmed, let's say, for example, I mean, if you start to cry, that's a clear stop sign, like,
yeah.
or if you're like not being able to remember the numbers, if like they keep slipping out of your mind because you're kind of frozen, stop. Don't go past the point where you can't like actually understand the things, right? So maybe you want to start with like setting a timer, set a 10-minute timer for whatever money task it is that you're doing. I'm actually taking this from a book by Barry Tessler. Barry Tessler is a financial therapist. She's one of the pioneers in this area. And she talks a lot about taking things in small doses. The psychology term would be titration, but really for everyone else, it's kind of like not overwhelming yourself because if every time you go towards your money, you have a negative experience, it makes you less likely that you're going to want to go and like look at it again. So if you need to set a timer for 10 minutes and you could make the whole thing into a ritual, right? And this is something again that Barry Tessler talks about, but like maybe you light a candle or maybe like after your 10 minutes with your money work, you like reward yourself with 10 minutes of walking in the woods. Like whatever it is that you have to do to start to grow your ability to engage with your money. Like if it's overwhelming, then do small increments. And over time, it does become easier because at the end of the day, money is a skill set. It's like learning how to drive. And as women, for women especially, like often we're told that like it's not part of like what makes a woman feminine, right? So like you don't want to actually deal with that, or like your husband will deal with it. And maybe we don't say that in today's generation, but our mothers and grandmothers were told that. And that message will come through without it being explicit. So again, as a woman, it's like growing your tolerance for the questions and being strong in your belief that this is a skill that you can master or a skill that you can feel comfortable in. And also knowing when it's time to like go to an accountant, go to an investment advisor, when it's time to outsource things. Like, yes, like for example, staying with the driving analogy or metaphor, it's good to know that like when your car rattles, maybe it means this, or that like the check engine light means you should go check the engine. You don't have to become a mechanic, but you do want to be able to like understand what your car is telling you. Does it need more? I don't know. I haven't had a car in 6 years. So this is like maybe not the
Yeah.
best metaphor because I've forgotten what my car needs. But I know at the time that like I was in touch with it, right? I knew what it meant. I was driving a couple of hours a day when I lived in Los Angeles. Um, and I would knew when it was time to go to a mechanic.
That's awesome. And one thing I mean, you said so many amazing things in there, but I think that making an accountability time where you set aside a certain appointment to review your money is so important, even if it is a short time. 10 minutes is, it's a short time to start with, but, as you point out, you can grow, but it's 10 minutes that you hadn't spent before. So it's a big step. Um,
Mhm.
so I love that advice. So Diana, to wrap up, I have what I call the Get Ready Hot Take Trio. These are three quick questions. Ask all of the guests. The first one is, what is one money myth you're trying to break?
Uh, I think it's a big one, but like assuming that your value is tied to your net worth, right? Having more money does
Yeah,
not make you into a more valuable person. Having less money does not make you into a less valuable person. Like our value as people is inherent to everyone.
I love that. And, it is relative. Some people are very fulfilled with a small amount of money and they don't need a lot of money. And we do know that I can think of one person who has more money than anybody in the world. And it doesn't seem like he's happy at all, or
Mm.
that there will ever be enough to feed the whole. Um, in a soul, or whatever you want to say. So I apologize to anybody watching or listening. Don't mean to offend anybody, but it is something to think about, is that more money is not going to provide you happiness, as you
Mhm.
say. And
Yeah,
it
and
has nothing to do with your value.
a person is not more valuable because they have more money. That's a myth. That's like very, very hurtful because it makes people fear. Like, let's say you're at a job that pays very well and that you're not enjoying and that is causing you a ton of stress, but you're not able to leave because it's well paid. Not because you need the money, but because the status of being well paid is holding you tied there. And then for people on the other extreme who think like because they don't have access to money, they must have done something wrong, right? We often blame people for their circumstances when sometimes it's like you were born into the right or wrong circumstances. It has nothing to do with your value as a person.
Yeah, I love that. And for people watching and listening, I'd recommend my episode with Raheem Sabri, where we talk about financial trauma, because that's very related to this conversation. Um, so the next question, Diana, let's get out the time machine for a minute. If you could go back in time, knowing what you know now about money, what advice would you give your younger self?
Hmm. It's interesting. I wanted to join the Peace Corps after college, and I was too fearful financially to be able to do it. And someone was telling me, like, you could still do it now. But like now I'm like, oh, I really love my work. Like, I don't want to take all that time off. But I was too financially fearful as a young person because my parents were not able to like support me and because I wanted to make sure that like I could care for myself financially. But I wish I had taken that risk and like gone 2 years. Because at the end of the day, I thought that like the sooner I start my career, the better. It took me 8 years to figure out what my career was. Like I wish I had just taken those 2 years with the Peace Corps and like trusted in my ability to make a living later on.
Yeah, I think that's a huge thing, especially when you're young, is to trust in your ability, is because you think that you have to do these things, um, rather than, like you said, it wasn't about money. It was about trust and where you were in the rest of your life. And I think that ties into everything we've been talking about. So the final question is, what's your number one tip to change the way we think about money?
There is a quote from Morgan Housel. He wrote The Psychology of Money, and I don't agree with all of his book, but there's a thing that he says where like money looks like math because it has numbers, but really it's much more of a psychology question or a psychology problem. And then I had an interview with one of my mentors, Gail Coleman, who said it's not so much a psychology problem as it's like a psychology question, right? Like money is a question about how do we decide what to do with it and also giving ourselves the flexibility to allow money to change, to see that money will change as our life circumstances change. When we think of money as a math problem, it's like there's a right or wrong answer, and there's not a right or wrong answer. It's like nutrition, right? Like paleo may be great for one person, and I don't know, the Mediterranean diet might be good for another one. And maybe that'll change as you grow older or like if you're pregnant. It's being more flexible with money.
I like that. And I think what you point out is that money changes as our circumstances change. Money is just a part of our lives and it's a tool, but that's a great reminder that as we grow through life, is money is going to mean different things to us. So money in and of itself doesn't really have any meaning. Um, it just enables us to do certain things. Um, so Diana, where can people learn more about you, your work, and tune into the Highly Sensitive Money podcast?
Yeah, one of the best places is, well, I have two websites, right? I have the allthecolors.net, and that's where you can learn about my money coaching. That's also where you'll find the podcast, Highly Sensitive Money. And that the podcast is on Spotify and Apple and all of the places. And for investment work, you can go to Natural Investments. and you'll find me as one of the advisors. I'm listed out of Nevada, which is where I split my time between Nevada and Mexico City.
Cool. And for everybody watching and listening, if you have access to the show notes, all those links will be in the show notes, so you can go to the show notes and find them. So, Diana, thanks for joining us on the Get Ready Before Life Happens podcast.
Thank you so much, Tony. It's been a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, this was fun. And thank you, everyone, as always, for tuning in. If this episode helped you change the way you think about money, please be sure to subscribe and to share with a friend. You can also go to tonystewart.com and join the Get Ready movement to get access to my resources and newsletter. Until next time, let's change the way we think about money.